Most gardeners make the same mistake when adding organic matter to their soil. They assume all organic material breaks down more or less the same way if you just wait long enough. That assumption costs you time, nutrients, and crop performance. I've seen beds stall for an entire season because the wrong material was added at the wrong time, tying up nitrogen and slowing growth when plants needed it most. Understanding why some materials break down quickly and others don't is not academic. It directly affects yields, soil structure, and how much work you end up doing later. If you're serious about growing food instead of just maintaining beds, this distinction matters. The real driver of breakdown speed is not time, it's structure and chemistry. Organic materials don't decompose based on how natural they are. They break down based on how accessible their carbon is to microbes. Soft green materials like grass clippings or fresh vegetable scraps have simple carbon compounds and relatively low linin. Microbes can get to work immediately. Woody materials, leaves with thick veins, and straw are built to resist decay. That resistance doesn't disappear just because they're organic. In raised beds, I've watched fresh grass clippings disappear into the soil within 2 weeks when applied thinly, while wood chips applied at the same time barely changed after 3 months. The difference isn't moisture or temperature, it's molecular complexity. Lignin-rich materials require fungi and longer timelines. Bacteria dominate fast breakdown. Knowing which group you're feeding determines how fast results show up. Carbon to nitrogen ratio explains most failures people blame on soil. Gardeners love to talk about carbon to nitrogen ratio, but often misuse it. High carbon materials don't just break down slowly, they actively pull nitrogen from the surrounding soil while microbes work on them. That's where yellowing plants and stalled growth come from. In practical terms, grass clippings sit around a 15 to 20 to 1 ratio. Shredded leaves are closer to 60 to 1. Wood chips can exceed 300 to 1. If you mix wood chips directly into a raised bed without adding nitrogen, microbes will rob the soil to compensate. I've tested this repeatedly. Beds amended with uncompensated wood chips showed weaker growth for an entire season, while the same beds amended with leaf mold or compost recovered quickly. When I want faster breakdown, I pair high-carbon material with a nitrogen source. 3 parts shredded leaves to 1 part fresh grass by volume is a reliable blend for surface application. In compost systems, I tighten that ratio even further. This isn't theory, it's how you prevent nutrient lockup. Surface area is more important than people realize. Shredding is not optional if speed matters. Whole leaves can take a year or more to fully break down. Shredded leaves can begin forming humus in weeks. The same material behaves completely differently depending on particle size. In my own beds, shredded maple leaves applied in a 2-inch layer showed visible fungal growth by week 1 and clear structural collapse by week 3. Whole leaves applied nearby were still mostly intact after 2 months. Microbes, you see, work on surfaces. When you increase the surface area, decomposition really accelerates. This applies in hydroponic systems too, especially in organic or hybrid setups. Any solid organic input must be broken down aggressively before it enters the system, or it creates oxygen demand and instability. Smaller particles decompose faster, but, they must be managed carefully to avoid anaerobic conditions. Moisture and oxygen, well, they determine whether breakdown is productive or destructive. Fast breakdown only helps you if it stays aerobic. Organic matter that stays wet without oxygen doesn't decompose efficiently. It just, kind of rots. That distinction really matters. In soil beds, I aim for organic layers that feel like a wrung-out sponge, wet enough to support microbes, but dry enough to allow airflow. Thick, matted grass clippings create anaerobic pockets and, honestly, they stink for a reason. Spread thinly, they vanish cleanly. Same material, different outcome. In compost or hydro-adjacent systems, aeration becomes, non-negotiable. When I brew compost teas using fast-breaking materials, I limit input volume and maintain continuous oxygenation. Organic matter that breaks down fast also consumes oxygen fast. Ignore that and roots pay the price. Fungi, really slow things down, but in doing so, they actually build longer-term soil structure. Materials that break down slowly often contribute, more stable humus. Leaves, straw, and woody debris feed fungi and fungal-dominated systems. They hold nutrients longer and improve aggregation. In perennial beds and long-term raised beds, I intentionally use slower materials on the surface. Shredded leaves and partially composted wood chips, they build a fungal network that stabilizes soil over time. Annual vegetable beds benefit from faster breakdown early in the season, then slower inputs later. The mistake is using slow materials when plants need immediate access to nutrients. That's how you end up chasing deficiencies that aren't really there. Temperature changes speed, but only within limits. A pile of wood chips in summer still breaks down slower than grass clippings in cool weather. Temperature amplifies what's already happening. It doesn't change the rules. In early spring beds, I rely more heavily on pre-decomposed material or nitrogen balance mixes. You see, cold soil plus high carbon input is a guaranteed stall. Once soil warms, decomposition accelerates naturally. Timing inputs to temperature cycles matters more than people admit, Animal-based inputs break down fast, but they're not forgiving. Manures, especially poultry or rabbit manure, decompose rapidly because of their nitrogen content and microbial load. That speed comes with risk. I've seen raw manure burn seedlings and spike nutrient levels unpredictably. In practice, I only use fresh manure in compost systems or fully aged applications. In soil beds, I prefer partially composted manure mixed with carbon-heavy material to moderate release. Fast breakdown is useful only when you can control it. In hydroponic systems, speed without control becomes instability. Organic matter in hydroponics must be pre-processed, Fast-breaking materials can crash oxygen levels and clog systems if added raw. I've tested leaf extracts, compost teas, and digested plant material extensively. Only stable, strained, and biologically active inputs belong in water-based systems. Here, faster breakdown is achieved outside the system, not inside it. That's a distinction soil growers often overlook when experimenting with organic hydroponics. The real lesson is matching material to purpose, not chasing speed. Gardeners often ask which material breaks down fastest, as if, faster is always better. But really, the better question is which material breaks down at the speed your plants and system actually require. Early season vegetables, they benefit from fast inputs like compost grass clippings and even partially decomposed matter, but long-term soil health depends on those slower materials that build structure. Problems definitely arise when people confuse the two. Over years of testing, the most productive beds were never built on just a single material. They used layers and timing, fast on top when needed, and slow underneath for stability. If your soil feels lifeless, plants stall unexpectedly, or fertility seems inconsistent, look at what you're adding and how fast it can realistically break down. The answer is almost always there. Understanding decomposition speed is not about compost trivia. It's about controlling nutrient flow, microbial balance, and soil structure with intention instead of guesswork. If this helped clarify how organic materials actually behave in real gardens, consider subscribing to the Husbandry channel and sharing this video. Growing better food isn't about more inputs. It's about understanding how materials work together over time and using that knowledge to build soil that improves every season. Husbandry